Hello, everyone. Welcome to Videocast with Vijay. This is episode 5. I have with me Mark Johnson, a former Navy officer, a successful entrepreneur, an author, and a fine thinker. Mark is the co founder and senior partner at Innosight, a strategy consultancy that he co founded along with Clayton Christensen, the thinker who influenced me the most. Mark just published his latest book, Lead from the Future. So let's go and explore some insights along with Mark on how we can lead from the future. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vijay. It's great to be here.
So it's a war-like situation right now with this COVID-19, and you are a former Navy officer. What's your philosophy of a comeback?
Well, I think back to as a former naval officer, an admiral in the Navy. His name was Admiral James Stockdale, and he was a prisoner of war in the Vietnam War. And he was the leader. He was the most senior officer of that group. And as they were dealing with being prisoners, his philosophy, his explanation to his fellow prisoners was, look, we need to have hope that we will make it through this. We need to have a North Star about where we can be past being a prisoner of war, but we have to be realistic at this moment. We can't be telling ourselves we're going to get out of here next month. If we do that, we actually will die. So it was having a vision or having a view of completing the mission, if you will, in military terms, but being realistic about the moment and the short term. And I think about that in this war that we're facing, like warlike situation with COVID-19. I think there's going to be as much opportunity as there is long-term threat about what this all means in terms of changing the way we are as human beings, the economic situations around the world, innovation that gets unlocked. There's lots of opportunity, and I think we need to think about as organizations what's our best possible future in them. But at the same time, we have to be realistic about how hard it could be next 12 to 24 months and be prepared. And a key piece of that I'm sure we'll talk about is, how are you prepared? How do you learn the right way? But that's how I would think about being on a sort of warlike footing as we speak.
When we think of future, for large companies, they see a longer time horizon, like say 5 to 10 years or even more, which you prescribe in your new book. But for small companies, especially the ones which are contract manufacturers or IT companies that are dependent on like outsourced work from somebody else, they have a shorter time frame and they are always caught up in this notion of doing. So what is future for such companies?
Well, Vijay, when in the book we did sort of land on the 5 to 10 year horizon almost as a common time frame for most companies and organizations. But you're right. I mean, there are some organizations that should even think longer, like a pharmaceutical company or a aerospace defense contractor that just have much longer product cycles. But then there's also shorter, I use the example of software companies, that are moving at the speed of light comparatively, and their long-term horizon might be 3 or 4 years out. So I do think if you're talking about someone in the IP space or contract manufacturer or what have you, they're going to have to look at it for their own circumstance. The key about looking out into the long term is it should be a place where you could actually develop a vision, that it has to be past the noise, if you will, of the and the resource allocation challenges, and all those things of of what excuse me, a budgeting or forecasting period, which for most companies, no matter who you are, you're going to have to be at least a couple of years past that to get beyond to a place where there's less noise. There's a way to start thinking about points of inflection, because trend lines come together. And so for a contract manufacturer or any of the examples you listed, they still have to be thinking about what is their long-term future. What do they need to think past their current core business to be able to sustain a trajectory of growth that allows them to, continue to grow in a way that allows their people to grow. And that usually means for any profitable business or any established business that you're focused more on the long-term top line revenue growth of the organization and all the ensuing capabilities that need to happen to make that take place.
So you mentioned about how IT companies are moving fast, especially in the last several years. We've been talking about digital transformation, new technologies, and all sorts of things. And everybody was trying to move very fast. My biggest inspiration, like Mahatma Gandhi said it very famously, speed is irrelevant if you're moving in the wrong direction. How do leaders help their employees or their followers get a sense of direction in this new context?
Well, that's such a great question. It's the essence of the book, Vijay. We make a distinction because I think we haven't tightly grounded vocabulary about what's vision and what's strategy. Vision is about, to your point, making sure you're not going in the wrong direction and trying to go harder in the wrong direction. It's about what is the right direction. We use a hockey analogy. Wayne Gretzky, the famous Canadian hockey player, who used to say, I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going. And then we take it a step further and say, not only should you skate to where the puck is going, but you should skate in such a way that you shape to where the puck should go. And I think vision is the part about deciding what game in the first place you should be playing in the future, along with maybe your existing game, right? Whereas strategy is about how do you take the existing game and win? How do you maximize your chance of winning in the game? So I think we need to make that distinction about vision and strategy. And the whole process of vision should be more than just a half-day exercise to come up with a inspirational statement like we'll be the best medical device manufacturer in the world, or we'll be number 1 or 2 in our industry. It should be something that's thoughtfully developed, that comes up with a point of view about the way the world's going to work in the future, the key assumptions about various trends and other potential disruptions, and then how do you put yourself in that future to create the best possible future for your organization. That should be laid out in terms of a portfolio of businesses and capabilities at the high level. If you go through the process and spend enough time in the foresight of the future horizon and trying to develop insights about what is the art of the possible, I guarantee you, in experience, you will come up with a perspective, that your team will come up with a perspective of what's the direction they should take, based on having spent time debating and discussing the environment and the implications of that environment on what you should do. I have never seen it not happen like that, especially if you keep also perspective. This is not about certainty. This is about developing clarity. It's about getting an impressionist painting of the way the world works and how you fit in it, not a perfect photograph. But that impressionist painting, that clarity that you get as a team, is how you get direction and to feel good about that direction. And then the final point is that direction is not a permanent one and done. You bring that future into the reality of the present with the kind of initiatives you undertake, and then you constantly work to adjust that future, shape it, and in the initiatives you're working today. And that's how that really all comes together in letting the direction drive the organization, but without feeling like you're permanent on anything that could risk, that creates the kind of risk that I think so many fear about talking about the future.
Thank you, Mark. And I like the choice of the word shaping. It's more of giving form. But all these years, leaders have been kind of giving direction, and because the road is known and everybody who's part of that process have all been following a fixed path. The road is set. Now it's been upended. It's turned upside down. How do leaders convince their employees in this stage? Because as you say, there is lack of clarity on the direction. So on vision definitely gives a way forward, but to enroll them into the process, Are there
Yep.
any advice that we can get from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the specifics are, one is that North Star vision, as I've said, more than a vision statement that really describes the hopeful future of the organization that in many ways should transcend, or I guess you wouldn't say independent of the next 12 to 24 months in the crisis, but transcends it to where you're kind of past the stormy waters and sort of in the aggregate, this is where you want to go. The organization, just as many leadership gurus have talked about, you have to communicate that vision. You have to be good about how you articulate the narrative and be a good storyteller and bring other people along and motivate them toward that vision. At the same time, you have to help your people understand the realism and the reality of the uncertainty over the next 12 to 24 months. And that's where scenario planning comes in, to be able to think about different ways that things could go and the implications, the options of each potential path. Those are more of the strategic considerations, right? How are you going to get to your intended vision? But you have to have that ability to know that there could be some different paths, especially in the short to midterm, that you're going to have to take to keep your organization viable in the short term, because it can't run out of cash. It needs to stay sustainable. So you're going to have to right the ship and do whatever it takes to sustain the cash flow. But you also then should be planting the seeds for how you look at the organization coming out over the next 12, after the post-COVID crisis, if you will. But that should be then also informed back to the vision. And I think how you bring people along is just like the vision. You just have to be clear about communicating just like Admiral Stockdale, the realism that things will be tough in the next 12 to 24 months, but we can get through it. And here are the different contingencies that we're putting in place to see our way through. So honesty and transparency, I think, are more important than ever, but not overselling anything, because nothing is certain. But people do need clarity. Certainty will kill the organization. Clarity will help it get to where it needs to go.
What strategy is everything. On other times, people just say, "Oh, execute, execute." We don't have mental bandwidth for thinking. But in a war, strategy is everything, because there's absolutely, we don't know what's going to happen next. Right now, there's a war between certainty and uncertainty, short term versus long term, assumptions versus knowledge. What are the values and the mindset that's required to strategize effectively in this context? And what are some of the hindrances that you see to achieve that?
Yeah, no, another great question, Vijay. I think it's about being able to be both oriented towards the operate and execute mentality. What I talk about in our book, Lead from the Future, is being present forward minded. Um, that's going to be 80 or 90% of your job as a leader. You're going to have to be able to take things as today and respond to the situation and move the existing business forward in time. Um, Being able to react, to being able to respond and make the choices that need to make to continue to drive the sustainability of the core business. But then you need that 10 to 20% mindset, which is about vision and strategy. It's about thinking more mid and longer term along the lines we've been talking about in terms of an overall vision, and then the strategic scenarios that are going to be facing you. And that mindset should be more exploratory, instead of it being an operate and execute and let's give me the latest information and let's make a linear decision. This one more is an iterative learning loop. When you're thinking future back to the vision or strategic scenarios, you should be exploring before you envision, exploring different assumptions that you're making as a team and diverging on a long set to converge on a short set, because assumptions are not facts, they're assumptions. So you have to develop them together over time and come to a shared set. Those then become the means of those assumptions then need to get proved. So you need to explore, and then you need to envision, envision what is the art of the possible of of future opportunities and businesses that you want to establish. If you're an education institution, how do you envision being more online that you've been, and how does that connect with being in person with students, and how do those coexist of a virtual classroom and an actual classroom? Um, and then you have to discover, which is how do you bring that vision of a new opportunity or your overarching enterprise vision back to a portfolio of initiatives today, not just the core, although that would be the majority of what you have to do, but what are those new and different initiatives that are the seeds that you're planting to take advantage of the opportunity post-COVID and beyond, to ensure your sustainability of the organization.
So there's a lot of talk on strategy here. Strategy, we all talk about how it is a choice around resource allocation. Right
Mhm.
now, every good resource, like whatever was their core strength, it's all now changed. It may become a weakness, or it is a weakness already. So how do we identify what is a good resource, and how do we make choices around those resources?
Well, I would just say that, to me, the choice making about resources falls into three key buckets, because I think the essence of all of this, strategies about choice, strategy, vision, and strategies, really ultimately the ultimate of leadership is to then make resource allocation decisions. And I think certainly the first that's on everybody's mind is, scarce resources of dollars, of cash, of the so forth. But it's also about the scarcity of people within the organization, and that they're almost always overworked and overtaxed in what they're doing, and there's nobody really available for being able to think about the new and different. And then, and I think what's even more overlooked is management bandwidth. There's so much coming at senior leaders that they're overwhelmed just operating and executing their business, and they don't have any time to carve out to support the learning journey of their innovation teams, what they themselves need to be thinking about to be a more forward-looking organization. So I think it's first important to categorize what is scarce resources in those three buckets of dollars, people, and management bandwidth, and not forget that that leadership bandwidth is a very, very important piece that I think so often gets overlooked. And then the key is in all of this is to be able to come up with what is the right mix between your focus on the core and your focus on beyond the core. And that's best done future back by being able to look based on the vision, what's the core going to look like? How do we think about its contribution in the future? Because many core businesses commoditize and decline, right? And we have to be realistic about that. And then how does that, if you will, growth gap get filled by determining how you transcend beyond maybe not just your core company's business, but you might even be able to transcend an industry like Apple did in the early 2000s when it went past a personal computer into consumer electronics in multiple industries related to that, music and and telephony and so forth. So so the key is being able to portfolio manage in the dimensions of those resources I said, but you can't really get the best insight about investing for the future unless you work it future back. Hence why I put so much emphasis of going out to that 5-10 year horizon and working back to today.
Speak about evolve or die, and how do we let our past or all the things that we have, the baggage that we have brought so far, to die quickly, because there is the fast shift and a switch that's required. It's almost like on and off that's required.
Mhm.
What would be your advice?
Well, it's another great question. I think the hardest thing organizations face is what they're going to slow down or stop or let go of. That's why I reinforce the importance of long-term thinking and having a process to be out there in the future. What we have found, it's much easier to have a conversation out 5 to 10 years about what things are going to be, in the worst case, irrelevant in that future, what things are going to be not as relevant in the future, and what things will still be viable, and have a safer conversation to at least to start the discussion of what we should be prepared to slow down or let go or stop. Um, because I think it's the hardest job of an organization is to shape the portfolio on the projects that no longer make sense. We've seen from an innovation management, we call them zombie projects. These projects that have sponsorship and have had it for a long time by a group of leaders and others that just no matter what comes back, they just seem to still sit there in the overall innovation portfolio. It's very hard in the moment to be able to just say, this doesn't really make sense. But when you look from a forward-looking and future-back perspective, you can make that a lot easier. And it needs to be, because so often, in order to really do what are the real opportunities that become made known by looking into the future, you're going to have to make room for the investments in them. And those mostly will come by reshaping the portfolio of those things that you're investing in, like say in core business, that are only marginally improving things. You've kind of run out of what we call innovation headroom. And so therefore those efforts should be slowed down and redeployed towards something that creates much greater opportunity for innovation and growth. So that's what I would say to it. Is it's probably one of the hardest parts of management. But the best way, again, to do that is to be having a longer term planning horizon in addition to the shorter one.
Okay, so things that are in no sight, you can bring into your sight through Mark and his team at Innosight. If you are willing to create a strong vision, and if you are willing to back it up with good strategy, and most importantly, if you're willing to shape it by setting time to think and work with your team and enroll them, then we can effectively future back and lead from the future. That's what I get from this conversation with Mark Johnson. Mark,
Yep.
Thanks so much for your time. You've been very generous, and I really appreciate you for making time and giving these insights to me.
Well, thank you very much, Vijay. It's been great to be on your show. Bringing this all together, I just can't emphasize enough, especially in these times of uncertainty. The operative word is learning. We have to be better at learning. When we started Innosight about innovation, we said the other side of the coin of innovation is learning, and then the other side of learning is humility. There's not a time more important than now for us to be thinking about. This is never a one and done in anything we talked about. You have to be in learning mode, exploring, envisioning, discovering what is the art of the possible. What do we need to learn, and then how do we need to learn it, and be ready to pivot, to be ready to learn and pivot and adjust based on as information comes into the forefront that helps us understand how things are unfolding. The organizations and the people that are keep having the highest humility and the greatest effort of learning are the ones that will make the adjustments, and they will be the ones that have the greatest chance to not only be sustainable but come out on the other side actually stronger and having taken advantage of a lot of opportunities that will be born because of this crisis.
Thank you, Mark. Keep writing, keep thinking, keep contributing. We are always willing to learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vijay.